This is Anil with a video tutorial for the Learning Lad on C programming. In this video tutorial, we're gonna see the C preprocessors and in particularly we're gonna see the preprocessor directive hash define. So a preprocessor is a program that's gonna process our source code before it is passed to the compiler for the compilation process. So this preprocessor offers several features called preprocessor directives for us. So we can classify them as macro expansions that allows us to create some identifiers and use them in our program. Then we can include some files using some preprocessor directives that are made for file inclusion. Then we have some conditional compilation preprocessor directives, then some miscellaneous directives. So for the file inclusion, we have already used this hash include preprocessor directive. Now we're gonna begin with our preprocessor directive hash define. Let's see the syntax of this hash define preprocessor directive. So to use any preprocessor directive, first we have to prefix them with a hash symbol. Then we have to use the preprocessor directive. In this case, we are dealing with hash define preprocessor directive. That's why we're gonna write hash define. Then we have to write the macro name. As you can see here, a space should be added here after this preprocessor directive define and a macro name. So the space between this hash and define is optional. If you want, you can add it or you can ignore it. So then after this macro name, we have to write the character sequence. So this macro name is the identifier that we are going to use in our program, and this character sequence is the characters or the values that gonna be replaced wherever we use this macro or the identifier. Notice that there is no semicolon in this statement. There may be any number of spaces between the identifier and the character sequence. But once the character sequence begins, it is terminated only by a new line. Now we're gonna create an identifier using this hash define, and we assign it with some character sequence or some value. Then we're gonna use that in our program. And now we're gonna create a identifier using hash define. Then we're gonna name it as limit, and we're gonna assign it with a value of 10. So we're gonna use this limit identifier in our for loop, to check how many times our for loop has to run. So another thing is, this character sequence, once it begins, it must end with the new line. So here we are writing this macro name or the identifier name in capital letters. It is not compulsory, but if we write it in the capital letters, then when we read our source code, we'll come to know that okay, we are using identifier or a macro here, just for us to read our program easily. So now we're gonna use this limit identifier in our program. So first we're gonna create a counter variable. Then we're gonna use our for loop. Inside the for loop, we're gonna write counter equal to 0. Then we're gonna make it to 1. Counter is less than or equal to limit. Then we're gonna increment our counter variable. And here inside this for loop, we're gonna print our counter value. It's gonna be %d, then a new line, then it's gonna be counter. So here we are using this identifier limit. When we compile our program, before that compilation process, our preprocessor program is gonna run. So our preprocessor first search for any macro definition. So here this is called a macro definition. So here when it encounters a macro definition, it's gonna search for that macro name or this identifier in our program. So when it finds this identifier or the macro name, it's gonna replace it with a value specified as here. So our preprocessor program is gonna replace this limit with a value of 10. We can refer this limit as many times we want. So it's gonna be for counter equal to 1, counter is less than or equal to 10 counter plus plus after our preprocessor program finishes its processing. So now we're gonna save our code, compile it, and we're gonna run it. So as you can see here, our for loop has ran 10 times. That's because here the condition was 10. So the next thing is, once a macro name is defined, we can use it as part of the definition of other macro names. Let's say we are defining a macro called top, and we can use this limit here, limit plus 1. So we can use this top macro here also. Compile it and run it. So as you can see here, our preprocessor program has replaced this top with this 10 plus 1. That's because this limit has the value 10, then this counter is less than or equal to 10 plus 1, that's 11. That's why our for loop has ran 11 times. So we can close it. Similarly, if you want, you can define a string value also. Let's say hash define name. I'm gonna say identity. So here I'm gonna use a printf statement, and I'm gonna refer this name identifier or the macro name. So what happens is our preprocessor program is gonna replace this name with this Anil Shetty. It's gonna be printf, then in double quotes it's gonna be Anil Shetty. So here this name will be replaced with Anil Shetty in double quotes. So save it, compile it, and run it. So as you can see here, Anil Shetty will be printed. Close it. And now we're gonna see why we have to use these macros in our programs. Let's say you're gonna write a program of around 500 to 1000 lines long, and you are using macro, let's say name, in your program, or you have to use some constant in your program all around. Let's say your company name here. You are referring this name macro in your program several times. For some reason, if you have to change the name in your program and you are not using this macro, then you have to go through your program, that's about 500 to 1000 lines, and you have to find this Anil Shetty and you have to replace it. So if you're using a macro like this in your program, then you have to just make a change here in the macro definition, so the change will be reflected in your program. The next thing is, you can do the same thing by using a variable. The advantage of using this macro is this macro is gonna run or make your code to run faster. And the second thing is, if you're using a variable, then your variable might be altered in your program. So if anything happens like that, then it's very difficult to track that. So this is it. This is about the hash defined preprocessor directive in C. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next tutorial.